Yes, good evening, everyone, and welcome back to the Football Tribe TV channel. Robert Kesakos is the usual suspect. Welcome back to yet another live podcast on your favorite football updates channel on this beautiful Thursday night on the 30th of October, the last day of the month of October. No, is it the last day? No, tomorrow is the last day. Apologies. Yes, sorry, I got ahead of myself for a second there. But yeah, good to have you on the broadcast, on the channel. It's a pleasure to be here once again with you guys. I hope you do enjoy today's podcast. We'll be discussing the latest from the world of football, or as the case always is, there's plenty for us to talk about. You know, there's plenty for us to discuss on this beautiful Thursday evening, including the managerial changes that have happened at Juventus, while Celtic themselves remain in the search for a new manager. Kian McKenna of Ipswich Town is saying he has not been contacted in regards to the vacant role at Celtic following the resignation of Brendan Rodgers. So he's not having it. Nor is the Wales national team manager, Craig Bellamy, interested in the job as well. So that's what's happening on that front. So we'll be discussing, some of those things. Liverpool, unfortunately, have another player out through injury. And from what we gather, it's going to be for over a month, which is not very, very good news for a team that is already struggling with squad depth issues. I will be talking about the comments of Anna Slot when he was speaking about his squad issues. Of course, injuries are not helping, but I thought he said words that we do not expect that to be from him. And the reason as to why I say that, I will give you my justifications for that in the course of this broadcast. But I thought, he tried to draw reference to Manchester City, which I thought did not, deliver the right message or the intended message, maybe. In fact, his statements are an indictment on himself, given that he just came out of the first summer. Actually, the third transfer window in his Liverpool career as a manager. So, really, he ought to have done better in choosing his words in regards to his squad comments. So we'll be digesting all that and more into tonight's broadcast. Like it says, Luciano Spalletti has been named the Juventus manager. So we will begin at there with the news of Luciano Spalletti. Now, guys, managers or football managers are sometimes like politicians. They're sometimes like politicians. They'll say one thing and then they'll say another when times have changed. But it's also a white man that says it's only a fool that does not change his mind. So perhaps we could say that Spalletti did change his mind, because in the aftermath of the 2022-2023 campaign, when he guided Napoli to the triumph of the Scudetto of the Italian Serie A, he did say that he wouldn't be back in Italian football at club level, that he was as good as done. That, of course, after a period of having managed teams like Inter Milan, teams like AC Roma, teams like Udinese in the Italian Serie A. But yet again, here we are, maybe a couple of years down the road, and he's back into club football, this time around at the helm of one of Italy's biggest club in Juventus. He does replace Igor Tudor, who was sacked after a spell of poor results in which they had not won a game of football in 8 fixtures. They had about 2 draws and I think about 6 losses during that poor run of games, that including losing to teams like Real Madrid by goal to nil in the UEFA Champions League, that included a loss to a 1-0 loss to Lazio, a 2-0 loss to teams like Como, and things like that. So at the end of the day, he was shown the exit. Now, Igor Tudor himself, he took charge of Juventus in March when they had sacked Thiago Motta. Now, Thiago Motta also was also into his first season at the club. Remember, Thiago Motta takes on the reins from Maximiliano Allegri. Now, Maximiliano Allegri did part ways with Juventus prior to the end of the 2023-2024 season. When he parts ways with the club, of course, they let it slide, wait until the end of the season, appoint Thiago Motta, who was leaving Bologna, to join them. Now, he joins them. Long story short, things did not work out as planned for him, despite him having played very, very impressive football at Bologna, including guiding them to a European football qualification at the end of the 2022. Sorry, at the end of the 2023-2024 season. Now, in March, they sack him and appoint Igor Tudor, who was supposed to be an interim manager. He did fairly well until the end of the season. They thought they would continue with him. They did continue with him into the FIFA Club World Cup. Again, the results were a bit fair, but they decided to give him the role to continue as the club's head coach. So he started a fresh season under his charges. And yeah, that poor run of 8, results in 8 games is what got him sacked. And yeah, now we have Luciano Spalletti. Like I've said, he's a manager with lots of experience, having part ways with Napoli after guiding them to the Scudetto in the 2022-2023 campaign. He left and joined the Italian national team to replace Roberto Mancini. Roberto Mancini is the guy that he did replace. He then took the team to the Euro 2024 and they got knocked out, I think, at the round of 16 at the hands of Switzerland. Fast forward, sometime this year, he was equally sacked at the Italian national team and he was replaced by, guess who? Gennaro Gattuso. Gennaro Gattuso, in terms of his club management, of course, having managed teams like Napoli, having managed teams like AC Milan, having managed teams like Valencia, not very successful at it, while at it, by the way, is now at the helm of the Italian national team, Gennaro Gattuso. So that's the man, Luciano Spalletti, that we are talking about. He did also manage Zenit St. Petersburg in the Russian top flight and guided them to a league title. So he's a man with a plethora of experience. That's Luciano Spalletti. Now, Juventus have avoided overcommitting again on a new manager. They've given him until the end of the season. So he will be in charge of the club, possibly for the next 8 months. That's when he will be in charge. And then they will decide after that whether to retain him on or they will choose to go separate ways and find a new manager. That's Juventus. Again, I think Juventus have struggled have struggled to be the giant team that they were, particularly under, of course, Antonio Conte, and then subsequently Massimiliano Allegri. In that sort of sense, remember during that time when they won, the Scudetto, literally for fun. I think they won it for 3 consecutive years under Antonio Conte. Then they did win it under Allegri. They had a very, very decent team. You remember that team that had Antonio Bazzagli, that had Giorgio Chiellini, Leandro Bonucci, Andrea Pirlo. I mean, very, very, impressive team. They reached 2 finals of the UEFA Champions League in a space of 3 years. That was in 2015. They lost to Barcelona 3-1. They reached to the finals in 2017, lost to Real Madrid. I think it was by 4 goals to 1. Gianluigi Buffon was in goal. So that's the kind of team that they are. Very, very successful team in terms of being one of the giants of Italian the Italian Serie A. So when you look at Apologies. So when you look at that, and because they've not been that keen, because Inter Milan have since taken over. Because I think Inter Milan has won 2 titles in between there, one under Antonio Conte and then another under Simone Inzaghi. And Napoli have won a title, and they have actually won 2 titles in that span of time. They've won under Luciano Spalletti. They've also won under Antonio Conte. That was last season. Then when you go back to, I think, the 2021-2022 season, it was AC Milan winning under Stefano Pioli. So um, that's how things have been in as far as Italian football is concerned. And Juventus have not been as good as they ought to be. As good as as good as they ought to have been in the last couple of years. So when you look at the reigning champions, Napoli, go back to 2023-2024. Inter Milan, go back to 2022-2023. Napoli, AC Milan. Then you go back to 2020-2021. It was Inter Milan, and then that's when you will find Juventus, because Juventus dominated the Italian Serie A between 2012 and 2020. They were the ones winning the title, and during that time, that's when they were managed by Massimiliano Allegri. They were also managed by Antonio Conte. So yeah, a very, very decent team. In that sort of sense. But yeah, that's what's happening. And I was trying to find the exact quote for Luciano Spalletti, what he said when he was leaving Napoli. Yes, this is what he had to say at the end, and this was around. He said this in March 2025, by the way. Napoli is my last experience at club level. I could never coach another team in Italy. And fast forward, we're in October, and he's at Juventus. So football managers are in a way like politicians. Never bet your arm on their word. Never bet your arm on their word. So everything is been done and dusted. He will take charge of Juventus until the end of this season. That's June 2026, and to extend until June 2027 if they do qualify for UEFA Champions League. So literally, his task is to guide Kenan Yildiz and Dusan Vlahovic and the core in terms of the rest of the team to a UEFA Champions League qualification for the subsequent season. But also, perhaps do better than they have done so far in the UEFA Champions League. So that's what he needs to do. That's what he needs to do in as far as this season is concerned. But when you look at, I think Juventus are around what, 6th or 7th there on the Italian Serie A table. Yesterday, they did win their game. Beating up against who was the opponent? The one that came by 3-1 because there were 2 penalties for Dusan Vlahovic and Kenan Yildiz. Yes, they were beating up against Udinese by 3-1. And when you look at the Italian Serie A standings, they are 7th on the table with 15 points from the opening 9 games, where they've won 4 fixtures, drawn 3, and lost 2 already. So that's what got Ugo Tudor sacked, this season. When you look at, like I said, in the last couple of results, but the one against Udinese yesterday, you'll find that they lost to Lazio, lost to Real Madrid, lost to Como. Then you'll find, those are 3 losses. You'll find a draw against AC Milan 0-0, a 2-all draw against Villarreal, a 1-all draw against Verona, a 1-all draw against Atlanta, a 4-4 draw against Dortmund, and then you will find a 4-3 victory against Inter Milan. So, results have not been very, very impressive so far this season, and that's why Juventus decided to make that managerial change. Anyways, away from Juventus, let's move on to Liverpool, because it has been reported today that Liverpool star Jeremy Frimpong, the right back signed from Bayer Leverkusen for a fee of 35 million euros during the course of the summer, is going to be out for a period of up to 6 weeks. That's a month and a half. So, meaning expect him around mid-December. That means they get to be left with Conor Bradley as the only natural right back that they do have in their squad. However, Dominic Szoboszlai has proven that he can play in that role. I think Joe Gomez can also be played in that role. So, whereas it's not an ideal situation, Liverpool have options that they can play in that role as far as their left back is concerned. So, sorry, right back, as far as their right back is concerned. Now, I want to go to some of the comments that he made in the aftermath of their 3-0 loss to Crystal Palace that saw them being knocked out of the EFL Cup, that's the Carabao Cup, on Wednesday nights at Anfield, where he fielded a very, a composition of young and mature players, but some of the seniors being Andre Robertson, Freddie Woodman, who joined the club as a third choice goalkeeper in the summer, was a free agent from Preston North End, Federico Chiesa leading the lines, Alexis McAllister playing alongside him, just behind him. Then you had Wataru Endo in that midfield, but you had, you had a set of youngsters in that team, the likes of Riongo Moha, I think Tyra Morris, Nyoni, those kinds of kids. Now, in the aftermath of that game, he did say, Analyst Slot said, and I quote, I saw Manchester City starting 11 and they didn't have one starter from the weekend, but it felt like their best team. He goes on to say that that is a bit of an insight. Chelsea can bring in, he adds on, and I quote, that's a bit of an insight. He says Chelsea can bring bring Estevao in. Then after I made 2 substitutions tonight, we had 6 teenagers. Now, I believe these statements are an indictment on himself. We're talking about a manager who had an overall spend of about £450 million in the course of the summer. Now, of course, when you do the deductions of the players that they sold, the net spend comes to about £200 million or thereabouts. And the reason that's why I say this critically is because I'm going to draw comparisons with Arsenal. The reason why I say that this statement particularly is an indictment on himself, for him to come out and say that I saw Manchester City starting 11 and they didn't have one starter from the weekend, but it felt like their best team. What team is he talking about when he talks about Manchester City? Of course, it was a very, very strong starting 11 because on the pitch you had James Trafford, who is a summer signing from Burnley, the goalkeeper. They had Kushanov in that centre back alongside Nathan Ake. They had Rico Lewis, and then they had Ryan Atnori. Ryan Atnori equally, a summer sign. In midfield, they had Nico Gonzalez, signed in January 2025. They had Jeremy Doku. They had David Mukasa. They had Omar Mamosh at leading the lines. Who else? I'm trying to recall that starting 11 for Manchester City. So, but David Mukasa is an academy player for Manchester City who was, I think they had Oscar Bob in that same team, and I'm struggling to recall who the other was. So, yes, it is true what he says that the starting 11 for Manchester City that faced off with Swansea and beat them by 3 goals to 1 goes from Omar Mamosh, Jeremy Doku, and yes, Ryan Cheki. And Ryan Cheki was in that same team. Was different from the one that started off the weekend. Hi, LFC, good to have you back. You do join us at a point when we're discussing Liverpool specifically. So the reason that's why I want to say this statement is an indictment on him is because All those signings are not summer signings. And it's not like Manchester City went out in a transfer window where they were the only ones allowed to sign players and build their squad. You know, Manchester City are a team in transition. They know that and have been for this is the second year running. You know, they're a team in transition. And they came to that realization as early as January. That's why they went out and signed Omar Mamush, Kushanov, Nico Gonzalez, and Victor Reyes. Now, Victor Reyes has since been loaned out to Girona in the Spanish La Liga. Then they came to the summer prior to the FIFA Club World Cup, and they signed Ryan Ashnory, Ryan Cheki, Tijan Williams, the goalkeeper from Chelsea. His name does elude me. The franchise goalkeeper. They signed James Trafford. Those are 5. They signed Delodi Donnarumma. That's 6 players that they did sign in this recently transfer window. Now, what did Liverpool do on the other side? They signed Hugo Ekitike. They signed Florian Wirtz. They signed Conor Bradley. They signed Milos Kakes, not Conor Bradley. They signed Jeremy Frimpong. They signed Giovanni Leoni. Then they signed, they brought in Georgi Mamadashvili, who from, was it Valencia? And then they brought in, of course, Alexander Isak. And then who else? They almost brought in McKay, but were not dwell on the almost. Then they brought in the Freddie Woodman. Now, that's 8 players. Isak, Ekitike, Wirtz, Jeremy Frimpong, Milos Kakes, Giovanni Leoni, Mamadashvili, and Freddie Woodman. That's 8 players, as many as Arsenal did. Now, the reason as why I want to say that this statement that Arne Slot is saying, I saw Manchester City starting 11, and they did have one starter from the weekend, but it felt like their best team. What he is trying to allude to is about Manchester City's squad depth. Now, the reason as why I say it's an indictment on himself is Liverpool, under his guidance, they focused on bringing in marquee signings. And that's not a problem whatsoever, for as long as you can afford it. But I thought they focused more on the marquee signings and lesser on the overall squad building. For those of you that are regulars on this channel, you will remember that we did have this conversation when we were previewing how we expected the season to go for respective teams, especially from the top 6. What they had in their squads, what the requirements were, where we thought they needed to improve, where we thought they needed to strengthen, in that sort of sense. We looked at their weaknesses, we looked at their strength, and everything. So if you do recall those conversations, particularly when we were discussing Liverpool, I did mention, and I will recollect this. We talked about their defense. I told you guys they needed a defender. Having let go of Joel Concha to join by Leverkusen, they needed to bring in 2 defenders. Reason being was Joe Gomez was oftentimes injury prone, who, by the way, they were willing to let go, provided that they brought in another player. Now, eventually, they brought in Giovanni Leoni. Unfortunately for them, he suffered an anterior cruciate ligament, the youngster from Parma. Now, what that meant is that they left themselves with Virgil van Dijk, they left themselves with Ibrahim Konate and Joe Gomez as the 3 natural centre backs within that team in regards to the first team squad. We drew comparison to that with Arsenal's numbers, and we saw that Arsenal were better in that department. On the deadline day, they tried to sign Mark Kane while trying to sanction a deal for Joe Gomez to head out to AC Milan, which I thought, even if they were able to land Mark Kane, they still needed to retain Joe Gomez. But long story short, none of those deals went through. Then we moved to their midfield. And I remember Liverpool fans on this channel making an argument of how Ryan Gravenberch was the best midfielder there was in the Premier League. Whereas I did not disagree much or depart much from their thought process. I did labor to explain that Liverpool lacked depth in that role. I did remind Liverpool fans and minders and all football enthusiasts that Liverpool, but that first of all, Ryan Gravenberch is not a natural number 6. Whereas he was able to play that position really, really well, immaculately, excellently well last season, there was no guarantee he would deliver the same performance. And even if he were able to replicate that performance, the other question was, can Liverpool afford to lose him to injury for a period of 2 to 3 months and remain performing consistently at the same level with his absence? What were Liverpool's options to play in that role? It was only Wataru Endo, who is a natural holding midfielder. Now, the manager that signed him, Jurgen Klopp, at the start of the 2023-2024 season, did not trust him enough, and neither did Arne Slot during the course of the last campaign. Yes, he's given him minutes, but he could have given him more. Then we looked at makeshift number 6s and who was there. Again, you had to look to either Szoboszlai or McAllister, who will not give you the same kind of performance in that role as would Gravenberch or a natural number 6. I did remind you guys that last summer but one, that was at the start, prior to the start of the 2023-2024 season. Prior to the start of the 2024-2025 season, Liverpool tried really, really hard, and they almost did succeed. But unfortunately, at the last minute, things changed. They tried to sign Martin Zubimendi. They never got him. Why? They were intentional on looking for a holding midfielder. The reason as to why they were looking at Martin Zubimendi in the summer of 2024 is because in the summer of 2023, they had missed out on 2 targets for deploying midfielders. They missed out on Moises Caicedo, for whom they had agreed a deal of about 110 million pounds before Chelsea came in with 115 and, swooped him away. Then they tried to sign Romeo Lavia from Southampton. I think they were offering to after about 45 million pounds. Chelsea came with 50. They took Romeo Lavia as well. So in 2 consecutive transfer windows, Liverpool had missed out on their top targets for a number 6 replacement. Whom were they trying to replace? Fabinho, who they had lost. So, fast forward into this season, we know Ryan Gravenberch did not start the season with Liverpool. They managed to win the first 5 games. They were winning in the Premier League. And for those of you that remember, I think Gravenberch missed about, 3 of those games through injury. Then he played a couple of games. You remember, particularly in the Merseyside derby, squad one created the other, and then he got injured again a couple of weeks later, and they've missed him. They've had that bit of shaky midfield. I think we last saw him, was it in the 2-1 loss against Chelsea? I stand to be corrected on that one. But so in midfield, they were a bit lightweight on numbers. Yes, you have Gravenberch, Wataru Endo, Szoboszlai, McAllister, Curtis Jones. I think those are the natural midfielders that they do have. If there's anybody else that I've skipped, correct me, Liverpool fans. Then we went forward. Forward, they do have the numbers. Now, they had a bit of a false start through the summer. 1, unfortunately for them, they had lost Diego Jota. May his soul rest in peace. 2, they let go of Darwin Núñez because they needed to move on to a better striker. Well and good. Then they made a blinder. Now, I understand the player wanted to leave, but he was still under contract for 2 years, and he was willing to stay and play for Liverpool. He wasn't desperate to leave, but he did want to leave. Maybe you do not want to keep an happy player. But when they moved him on, I thought they did not bring in a natural replacement. That was Luis Diaz. They let him go to Bayern Munich in the German Bundesliga. So that was 3 forwards lost from the previous campaign. Who did they bring in? They brought in Alexander Isak, Hugo Ekitike, Florian Wirtz. Now, when you look at all those buys, the only direct replacement was one, and that was a direct replacement for Darwin Nunes because they had their mind preset, or it was premeditated to Liverpool, that they needed to get a better striker than Darwin Nunes. And their top target was Alexander Isak. But we know how that deal dragged on throughout the course of the summer, and they got FTK fast. So they ended up with two strikers. Now, with two strikers, they also had it premeditated that they needed an attacking midfielder, at least in Anna Slot's concept. That's why they went for Florian Wirtz. Then, that means if you have to flip through the script, you would say, okay, you'd consider Hugo Ekitike as your replacement for Diego Jota. And then Alexander Isak for Darwin Nunes. Well and good. Who is the replacement for Luis Diaz? Nobody. And we're talking about a player who had his best season in a Liverpool jersey ever since joining them in 2022. So they did not do well. So for Arne Slot to come and tell us about Manchester City's squad depth that they did not build overnight or in one transfer window is an indictment on himself. Now, again, I would argue that instead of spending 200 million pounds on two players, actually in the excess of 200 million pounds on Alexander Isak and Hugo Ekitike, they would have gotten one of those and then gotten two players in the other 100, a winger and a midfielder. How you distribute that money, whether it's a 50-50 or 60-40 or 35-65, would have been up to Liverpool in terms of where their priorities lie. That's how squad development or squad building would have been. The reason as why I wanted to draw comparisons with Arsenal is because Arsenal fans had that debate during the course of the summer, particularly at the time when they were shifting their focus. I think because for them, they knew very early on that if they wanted Alexander Isak, but they knew it was going to be difficult. And if it were to be possible, it would have been very, very expensive for them. We knew about their interest in Benjamin Sesko. That was there. It was equally a bit more expensive. So what Andrea Butter did was to say, okay, we will get Peter Eucharist, who is slightly cheaper than all the other preferred options. Two, we will focus on adding both quality and numbers to the squad. Even for Arsenal's sake, following all the injuries that they had suffered the previous campaign, and they needed one, backups and replacements for players that had left. And I spoke about this. The majority of their signings were direct replacements. Kepa Arrizabalaga, replacement for Neto, who they had on loan from Bournemouth. Christian Mosquera was I think was a squad member. No, actually was a replacement for Takahiro Tomiyasu. Pierre Hincap, brought on loan from Bayer Leverkusen, was a replacement for Jakub Kiwior, who went to FC Porto. Christian Nogard, a replacement for Jorginho. Martin Zubimendi, a replacement for Thomas Partey. So you can see, how they were replacing. Then Noni Madueke was a backup for Bukayo Saka. Victor Gyökeres was a much needed forward player that they brought in. Then who is the other 8th player that they did sign? I'm trying to recall, because they signed a total of 8 players at the end of the transfer window, But when you look at it all, Arsenal look to spend wisely in terms of what they needed, what they wanted to build, as opposed to going for that one marquee signing. Because there was again a lot of speculation. Yes, the other player they did sign was Eberechi Eze. Now, who equally was not a direct replacement of anybody. You remember, we're having these talks of, what's his name? Rodrigo Goes. I remember us doing a debate. Who should it be, Rodrigo Goes or Eberechi Eze? I zeroed down to Eberechi Eze. We had the conversation. If it boiled down to Rodrigo versus Rafael Leao, we had that debate in regards to who Arsenal should, sign. But one of those was being looked at in the sight or in the eyes of a marquee signing. But it never arrived. So they went and spent 13 million pounds, arguably the best value for money that you can get for 13 million pounds and spend it on Christian Mosquera. They went and signed, Eberechi Eze for about 60 million pounds, about 52 on Noni Madueke, so much to the criticism of the club by a section of the fans who went online and even signed a petition to not bring in Madueke, but which was foolish of them, for lack of a better word. I'm sorry if the language sort of fails me. But in the first couple of games, majority of those that signed that petition did agree that Arsenal needed a player like Noni Madueke, because it wasn't long into the season that Bukayo Saka went on the injury rate with a minor hamstring injury, So they looked at that. Then about 55 million pounds on Martin Zubimendi, good spend of the money. You look at Kepa Arrizabalaga for only 5 million pounds, good spend of money. Experienced goalkeeper, you bring him as a second choice goalkeeper, 30 years of age. I mean, value for money in that sort of sense. Victor Gyökeres, we know what they spent on him, under, somewhere around 75 million euros. You look at their overall spend, how they spread around their, finances. Now, unlike for them, they did not sell much because they didn't have much to sell anyway, because they were looking to strengthen their team. The players that they looked to sell were very few, and that was Jakub Kivio, who went on loan, I think, with an obligation to buy. Who else? Zinchenko went on loan to Nottingham Forest, no obligation to buy. The other that they had wanted to sell coming into the summer was Gabriel Jesus. Unfortunately for them, he was out injured. So you look at the decisions that they made during the course of the summer, and they were more focused on squad building as opposed to a Matthew sign. Whereas for Liverpool, they looked to do squad replacements as would necessitate, but also looked more at Matthew signs. And so Arne Slot should only have himself to blame for having a narrower squad than his peers in comparison to, for example, the way he compares himself to Manchester City. I believe with that 450 million pounds, or nearly £500 million, they could have made better choices and better decisions in as far as how they spent their money. But so he can only play the hand he's been dealt with. And what Liverpool are facing, in part, particularly this season, is in part what Arsenal went through last season, and that's injuries. First of all, you've had yes, he does say that there's a possibility that Ryan Gravenberch returns for the game against Aston Villa, but we'll wait and see. But at the moment, you have Jeremy Frimpong out, Alexander Isak out, Gravenberch out, Giovanni Leone out, Stefan Bajcetic out, but Stefan Bajcetic and Jadon Danns won't consider those matches because they're not starters, merely squad players that hardly get minutes. But let's focus on the key members of the squad: Jeremy Frimpong, Isak, Ryan Gravenberch, Giovanni Leone, because he would have started in games because he got injured in that game against Southampton. So in yesterday's game against Crystal Palace, he would have started. Alson Ramsey-Specker and Curtis Jones. That's 6 injuries at the time. Now, imagine if they go into the weekend and possibly lose Mohamed Salah, and maybe lose Cody Gakpo or Szoboszlai. Can they contend with those injuries? My feeling is that it will be very, very difficult for them. Hi, Wendy. Good to have you. Good to have you back on the broadcast, on the channel. It's a pleasure to have you once again. So when you look at all those injuries that they do have to their roster, well, some will be back soon rather than later, but we'll have to wait and see. We'll have to wait and see, of what will happen. So Arne Slot cannot whine, cannot mourn, cannot lament about having a small squad compared to his opponents. While it is factually true that in terms of depth, they are better positioned than him, I'll put it to him, Bo, I daily join your life. Thank you so much. Thank you already. That's why I'm very, very appreciative for you being sparing your time, your precious time to be with us here on the podcast. So, Anna Slot can only look himself into the mirror and say, perhaps I could have made better choices in terms of how we spread our budget. So, for me, I believe he's saying all this as a result of pressure. Are you married? No. No. So you will look at it in that sort of sense. You'll have to look at it in that sort of sense that he ought to have made better decisions in as far as his budget is concerned. But I think he's also saying all this because he's under a lot of pressure. One, they play against Aston Villa at Anfield over the weekend, after which they will play at Anfield against Real Madrid in the UEFA Champions League. And then on the subsequent Sunday, possibly 9th of November, they will be up against Manchester City in the Premier League. So I do not know. I feel that he needs to win at least 2 of these games. Or better, win 1, draw 1, and lose only 1. But it would look really, really bad for him if he loses 2 of the 3. And even worse for him if he loses all 3. Because, if anything, what we have seen over the last 7 games is that it's possible that they can lose all. How does he motivate this team? I do not know. But he needs to pick himself up and remotivate this team. I was watching somebody, a podcast, and somebody was saying, yeah, last season he didn't change much. All he did was, steer the ship forward. And now that he's in charge fully and he's started building his own squad, it's all falling apart and he's getting found out. Well, I do not want to look at it in that sense. Only time will tell. You say freelancing writes what you write. Do I do freelance writing? I do, depending on what the topic is that you want me to write about. I don't know if you're saying that's what you do as well. Is that what you do? Ready? You do freelance writing? Tell me some job profile. Digital communications and PR, social media management and marketing, digital marketing. So that's what I predominantly do, and content creation, of course. Yeah, so, but I'm a jack of all trades. I also do personal assistant roles and things like that, remote work, remote support. I've done call center jobs and etc. So it depends on where life tosses me, but usually the former ones are the main lines of work. But thanks for asking, Wayne. So, anyways, guys, that's what's happening in the world of football. Like I said, do prepare yourself because match day 10 of the Premier League does get underway. I mean, we keep saying it's still early in the season. Digital marketing, which tool you use? I use the inbuilt social media platform tools. I do not do paid tools because it's a bit costly on my end. It's a bit costly. So I try to leverage as much as on free available tools. For example, I'll use the free version of Canva for some bit of graphics design. I'll use Meta Business Suite for Facebook, Instagram, and then just that basic. Of course, for things like X, we do miss TweetDeck because it used to simplify things, but it was put under a paywall, so we gave up on that. Anyways, so yeah, match day 10 gets underway. I will keep saying that it's still early in the season. Of course, for as long as we are barely halfway the season, it will always be still, the season will always be still young. Actually, I'm starting promotion video in platforms like Instagram. Okay. Um, wish you the best of luck. Own that front as well. Give it your best and see what the world has to return to you in the form of results. Anyways, guys, it's been 45 minutes of us doing this. But before we sign out, do not forget there was action today in the Italian Serie A. That action was ongoing between, I think, sorry, was it Cagliari that was in action today among the teams? Yes, Cagliari lost to Sassuolo by 2 goals to 1 as we speak. Lazio and Pisa are still nil-nil. So yeah, that's happening in the Italian Serie as we speak. You see, less price. I promote the video. Less price as in, what do you mean less price? Oh, you also do digital marketing and promotions. Oh, I understand that. Oh, I understand. I understand. But yeah, so anyways, guys, I will be back tomorrow, Friday, to begin digesting what's to come. And as far as the weekend is concerned, there will be plenty for us to discuss. Like I said, Premier League does enter match day 10. I think the Spanish La Liga goes into match day 11. So there will be plenty of games for us to preview from Saturday through Sunday. We will tackle Man United, Nottingham Forest, Spurs are up against Chelsea, Liverpool, Aston Villa, Arsenal away to Burnley, and things like that. So we'll get to digest those games starting tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. if nothing changes. If anything changes, usually if you do not see me at 9 a.m., be sure something happened. But yeah, we'll be back tomorrow morning to take you through what's to come on your roadster or on your menu in as far as the weekend is concerned from across Europe, but predominantly our focus is on the Premier League. So thank you so much for being part of the community. Those of you that tuned in tonight, I do not take your love and support for granted. It's well appreciated. Those of you that watch our broadcasts later after they're done, we do not take your time for granted. We appreciate you a great deal. Thank you so much for supporting what we do. And yeah, let's hope for the best. To our new subscribers, welcome to the Football Drive community. It's a pleasure to have you around. I hope you keep supporting us. You watch our videos, our shorts, our live broadcasts, and everything that we have to offer on the platform. Yeah, that's it for me. Have a blessed night, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye-bye for now.